It is so exciting to plan the garden every year, but it also can get kind of overwhelming. There is just so much to keep track of. I use Notion, which is a free organization and productivity app to plan a lot of other things in my life. So last year I started using it to plan my garden. And the way I organized it has made it so much simpler and faster for me that I wanted to put it together in a way that was accessible to everybody else and make it the best resource possible. All you have to do is put in your last and first frost dates, then head over to the plant database and select which plants you want to grow, and optionally put in a quantity for how much you want to grow. And I have preloaded this with over 160 different varieties of herbs, flowers, veggies, pretty much everything I could think of. You can view it by plant type, season, whether it's a warm or cool season plant. You can view by size or even by bloom time for flowers. Each plant also has a little growing guide in there with everything that I think you could want to know about this. So seed depth, germination time, and temperature, how high or how tall you can expect the plant to get, along with some practical suggestions for companion planting, and then other notes and tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. Once you've selected everything that you want to grow, you can head over to the garden planning section, where you can basically drag and drop different plants into different locations within your garden. And once you have all of that planned out, it will automatically calculate the dates that you need to start everything, whether that is indoors, transplant, or direct sow, and bring that all into this dashboard where you can kind of see just what needs to happen from week to week. And for every plant that you're growing, it also will bring a suggested list for succession sowing in on the side here. This isn't my actual last frost date, but if it was, you can see that I would need to be starting all of these things indoors. And what I love is that this just keeps you focused on what's relevant to you in this season. And when you go to plan your garden again next year, all you have to do is hit this clear for new season button, and everything will reset except for your frost dates, which you will just want to update to the current year. And what makes this super convenient is that you can set up a Notion widget on your phone, and so you can easily access this information anytime, anywhere. And I've included some resources and recommendations, including a list of seed starting equipment that I recommend, a big list of where to buy seeds that's organized by ecoregion so you can get stuff that's locally adapted, and a bookshelf full of my favorite gardening and food preservation books. With that overview, you should be able to just jump right in and start planning your garden. But if you want to know a little bit more about how this is set up and how it works, I'm going to go through kind of step by step and piece by piece. So first we have a cover and an icon, and if you find these distracting, you can just click and remove either one of them, or update it to one of your favorite photos from your garden. Next we have a synced block that provides navigation throughout this whole dashboard, and the thing to know here is if you make a change here, it's going to make a change everywhere else. Next we have this weather widget, and all you need to do is go to indify.co and configure their weather widget to your details. You can change the location, the units, and the number of days, and then you would just copy that and click on these three dots here, go to replace, and then paste in your new link. Next we have your last spring frost date and your first fall frost date. And this is set up to where it'll give you the dates for fall gardening and spring gardening. And the dates for your fall garden are based on how many days you've got left before your first frost. Even if you think you know what those are, I think it's a good idea to double check what the almanac is saying. So almanac.com/gardening/frost dates will give you the most recent and updated last frost dates for your area. A lot of people think that this is the same as your growing zone, but it is actually pretty different. You can be in the same zone as someone and have very, very different frost dates. So for me, my actual last spring frost is April 30th and the first fall frost is October 14th. Keep in mind that the last and first frost dates are a 30% probability, so for anything that has a risk of dying if it gets a little bit of frost, I have those calculated to go out a week or two after this date to make sure they're 100% safe. If you live in an area where it doesn't freeze, I've heard that the date to go by is around March 15th, but you can definitely ask more experienced gardeners or use this Weather Underground site to figure out when nighttime temperatures are at least 55 degrees consistently. I'm going to leave it as February 24th for demonstration purposes so you can see how this all actually works. Once those dates are set, it's going to connect to our master database, which I have in the under the hood section. You shouldn't need to be in this database very often, but you can see once it loads, it's basically everything about each plant. So it's a huge amount of information. It goes this way for quite a ways. So this is kind of the base information that's not organized in a very helpful way, but that is what I'm pulling into this plant database to see just what I need to see at the right time. And from here, you can hide different information if you don't think it's relevant, or bring in information if you think something's missing. So maybe I don't need to see the season, so I'll hit hide in view here. Maybe it would be more helpful to see the harvest date range here, so I can kind of see when things are going to be ready to harvest and possibly ready to swap out for something else. And for each plant, if you want to edit anything about it, you can go into all of these different properties. Normally they're going to be hidden, but you can open them up if you want to, and you can go through and make adjustments to anything that you want to. Gardening is such a unique experience per person and per location that I have pulled in the correct information as far as I can and cross-referenced it with all these different sources, but there are always exceptions to the rule. So if there's anything in here that you think, oh, that's not right, that doesn't match my experience, please change it, and that will make it more and more valuable to you over time as well. Under plant type, I have the life cycle, which is sometimes going to be different from when you're harvesting. So beets, for example, their life cycle is biennial, and that's useful to know if you are saving seeds, but you almost always are harvesting them in the first year. I have the zones that each plant is perennial or biennial in, so if you do want it to survive to the following year, what zones that can happen in, and then the sowing method as well, which I've got indoor, direct, or indoor or direct. Once you sow something, either here or in your dashboard, it's going to pull in this date that it was sown, and then for plants that can be succession sown, it will give you a new date 3 weeks from whenever you sow it that you can sow it again. I find that really helpful because I tend to just forget about succession sowing and always regret it. This can also be helpful when it's been maybe 7 days since you planted something and you're not sure when it's supposed to germinate. It's really nice to just have a record. Then if you want to see things by season, it's just organized alphabetically in cool and warm season. Next, I have size and square foot, and then whether or not they need support and the minimum grow bag size. And then finally, when we're talking about deciding what to grow, I have flowers all organized by bloom time. It is so helpful to have flowers that are blooming throughout your entire garden season, so that's why this is useful. And then you can also filter by flower attributes, so whether something is deer resistant, whether it is really a pollinator attractant, whether it's edible or medicinal, you can kind of see all of those different characteristics and make your choices on flowers that way. So I'm going to go through and select a few different plants and add the quantity that I plan to plant. This is actually a good example. I'm realizing as I'm selecting flowers that it would actually be helpful to see which of these are biennial, meaning they're going to grow leaves in the first year and actually flower in the second year. So all of that data is there, I just need to pull it up. So if I go into properties, you can see that I've got the plant name and whether or not I'm growing it here. But then if I go here to find, and you can just search for it too, life cycle, then I can see the life cycle as well. This is also where it might be helpful to do some customization. So nasturtium are a great example. They are technically perennial, but you might only grow them as annuals. So depending on the zones that you grow in, 10, 11, and 9, it can be perennial in those regions. So if you see this and you're like, well, doesn't apply to me, then just change the life cycle to annual. Once your selections have been made, then you can just view things in the dashboard and focus on what needs to happen from week to week. If you want to see a longer term view though, you can view it by your spring start indoors date, where everything is grouped by week, or your spring direct sow and transplant date, where again, everything is grouped by week. If you need to add a new plant, you can either edit one of the existing plant entries that you know you're never going to grow, or you can add a new one. Under veggies, herbs, or flowers, just click on new, open it up, and then twirl down the properties here. The most important thing is that you establish the relationship between this database and the dates. So all you have to do is click and select that, and then that relationship will be established, and then you can fill in, if you know it or can research it, your indoor dates, the sowing method, all of these different data points that I have pulled in for all of the other plants. Anything with this little sign in front of it is a formula that you don't need to touch. It will automatically calculate based on everything else that you're doing. If you need a definition for any of these terms, that is in the glossary in the Under the Hood section, along with the AI prompt that I use to generate most of these images. Okay, now to the garden planning area. This will just say location 1, 2, 3, 4 when you get it, but you can add or remove as many locations as you want, and you can adjust the properties as much as you want as well. So if you don't want to see all of this information, you can just curate it to show exactly what you want. And I am a chaos gardener at heart, so I just use this to get a general idea of where things should go and then kind of make decisions on the fly once I'm actually gardening. And when you first start out, all of your plants are going to be in this no garden location area. So let me put this back to where it was. I find it helpful to filter by size first and get your plants placed from largest to smallest. So we'll go for the XLs first. This harvest window is nice to see because you'll be able to tell once we get some of the other smaller plants in here, once your Brussels sprouts are done, for example, is there something else that can go in its place? Artichoke is perennial where I live, so this is where I would maybe add a new garden bed and say in ground. And if you want a plant to be in multiple locations, for example, bush beans, I plant those in several different garden beds. All you need to do is open up the plant card and then add a second location. Once your garden locations are planned, you can filter by season as well, so you can see how it might look in the spring and then how it might look in the summer. So this is what we would have in the spring. So maybe instead of having this bed so full in the spring, I would move some things over to the first bed. This is where having those harvest windows can really come in handy because I can see these beets, for example, should be ready by April 24th. And then I know based on my first and last frost dates that I could probably replace those beets with something like basil. Once all of those plans have been made, I can go back to my gardening dashboard and see just what needs to happen this week. So if the week comes and goes and you don't end up doing some of these things, it will not show it for this week, but you can adjust the filters to show whatever you want. So it can be this week, it can be your past week, it can be this week and next week. There's a lot that you can do with these filters. Or you could set it to show a month and then bring in the actual date so that you can see how far off the target you are. You can also go into each plant and adjust the indoor dates and all of this stuff if you want to. I have these set to the longest amount of time that you would want to start them indoors, so you could easily remove a couple of weeks off of this and be fine, which you might want to do anyways based on your own experiences. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, once you click sown on something, then it is going to populate the next day. If it's something that you can succession sow, it's going to populate that next date that you would want to sow it. I spent over 150 hours researching, writing, and organizing this template, so I really hope that you find it as useful as I have. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, then I would love to hear about it in the comments. I have more videos coming up about seed starting, gardening planning, all of that stuff, so if you have any questions or problems that you've had in your journey with seed starting, please let me know and I would love to address them. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.